Good afternoon and welcome to the latest ISPA Insights Video Interview, where we explore the relationships between our partners and the ISPs they work with. On today's episode, I am delighted to be joined by Matt Gardner, co-founder of ISPA partner RouteThis. RouteThis became a new ISPA partner in 2022 and looks to bring customer experience to the fore in the UK ISP market. Joining Matt today will be Elliot Hughson, first line team manager at Ask4 Internet. Ask4 were founded at the turn of the millennium and specialize in end-to-end technology solutions for multi-tenant units to ensure end users can have seamless internet connectivity. Today, Ask4 currently serves over 300,000 customers across 13 countries, with headquarters in the UK and offices in Spain and Germany. They are proud to support some of the world's leading providers of multi-tenant living and working spaces. To set the scene before we jump into today's discussion, the UK market is in an interesting position. We have recently hit 50% FTTP build nationwide, and now the focus of the market is switching towards the harder to reach areas and to driving take up of the improved gigabit broadband provisions, which is not easily done given the macroeconomic climate at the moment. And this is why I think today's discussion will be particularly interesting as we explore how the fusion between MDU expertise and CX software can enable improved gigabit-capable Wi-Fi for consumers in the most difficult to connect parts of the market, one of which being multi-tenant buildings. So to lead in today's conversation, I think I'd like to draw the conversation to Elliot and draw in on some of the challenges MDUs face when it comes to residential Wi-Fi.
So in residential Wi-Fi, we often see issues with users not having the best experience, we'll say, because of the way the network works. Sometimes you get lots of providers in one place all sending out their own signals and things like that. We see that you'll get disconnections from the network. There's sometimes intermittent speed issues, things like lack of Wi-Fi availability. A lot of this can come down to devices preferring one wireless network band over another. Obviously 2.4 being very congested and being the older technology, it doesn't quite operate at the best standard, we'll say, as opposed to 5 gig. So when it comes to the network itself, we can see things like there being network congestion or airtime being particularly high. It happens quite often in MTUs, and we're trying our best to make sure that we can sort that for our customers. We use RouteThis to try and diagnose these issues when we're performing support calls, but we can also see sometimes there's congestion and other things operating on similar wireless frequencies, from anything from our marker radar beacons for airports to people's fairy lights. So it can be quite a challenge to ensure stable connection.
Quite varied then.
Yeah.
And Matt, from a customer experience position, what do you find when you're dealing with Ask4 and other MDU providers? When does your solution need to come in and activate change and help those ISPs deliver better connectivity?
Yeah, I think a big challenge for MTU specifically, but really all types of service providers, is just how much information can your customer give you that is helpful in troubleshooting, and can you trust it? Not that the customers are not trying to give you the right information, but they're not as technical as your team, right? And especially for an MTU where you've locked down things like the access points, configuration pages, like your end users don't have access to any of that information that you might find helpful troubleshooting. And sometimes, in a lot of cases, you would have to walk them through, performing tests on a computer, or maybe like worse tests on a phone, like trace routes and pings. A customer doesn't know what that is, the average one, right? So having to walk them through those steps to just figure out, do I need to send someone on site? Do I need to replace equipment? Do I need to add more in an MTU situation? That's really difficult for the customer, and they're not going to love that experience. It's also going to cost you more money because of, just how long that takes and mistakes that can be made on either end. So being able to gather that information through RouteThis to troubleshoot just improves that experience. You just go, okay, instead of opening a command prompt, or instead of having to answer my 20 questions and hope that you get them right, you're going to download an app and hit go. And then I'm going to get all this great information that's going to let me make the decision on, can I fix it? Can you fix it? Or do I need to send someone out with increased chance that you're correct with the decision that you end up making?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And to provide you a bit of context towards my own Wi-Fi. So I live in an MDU unit. We have in the central London location, we have 4 FTTP providers building networks down our road. Unfortunately, the Wi-Fi that I have in my unit is barely noticeable. Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it doesn't extend beyond the room it's in. So I kind of know where you're coming from when discussing sort of consumer problems in MDUs. But I wanted to draw down on that a bit further and maybe ask Elliot first, is what do you find the most common issues are with Wi-Fi connectivity when you get reports back from your customer tenants?
So our customers tend to see disconnections more than anything. We do have a team specialized in deploying and building wireless networks, so we're pretty good at overall coverage. When it comes to other external sources, we can't really see where that's going to be to start with. We have to actually have kit in place first before we're able to go, oh, this is a problem, and then we go and fix it. So a lot of it's down to airtime usage, congestion, which I mentioned already, and it's just largely some people have really old devices as well. Some people expect Apple III phones to still work at the same speed as everything else. So that's also another challenge. But it's trying to make sure that we have the best availability, and it's often what we can do remotely to either increase the transmission power or make sure that the customer's devices are actually seeing the signal the same rate at which we're transmitting it. Because we can throw out lots of information at a customer's device, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to broadcast it back to us at the same rate. So it's very much a case of we'll get the diagnostics, and in this case we do use RouteThis for this, and see where we can go from there. So yeah, that's largely what we do.
And I was just going to sort of drill down on that as well in terms of your response to the Wi-Fi connectivity issues. And I'm sure Matt can attest to this. How does having managed software improve the efficiencies when you're dealing with these common connectivity issues reported by tenants?
I'd say for us, at least as a managed service provider, we obviously have control over what's being broadcast, and we can make changes on the fly. We are able to mess about with our network settings, ensuring that the radios and the access points or radio units are broadcasting at a suitable range, because you can put it all on high, and then the signal's great everywhere, but they're also interfering with each other. So it's very much a case of fine-tuning that once it's in place. We've got very smart people working at Ask4 ensuring that we don't deploy anything too outrageous to start with, and then we can make those fine changes later on. So with customers do report a problem, we look at that, we take their diagnostics from RouteThis, and then we send it up to our second line team and our NOC team. Sometimes our wireless architect gets involved and makes more finer changes, but it's very much a case of we can normally resolve issues pretty quickly if they do crop up. Sometimes it does involve sending one of our engineers and installing additional equipment, but oftentimes it's a lot of fine tuning what's already there.
No, that makes sense. And Matt, from RouteThis perspective, you obviously work with Ask4 and you work with several other ISPs. Is kind of the benefits Elliot has just mentioned using RouteThis services the same as other vendors you work with? Is there any uniqueness around this sort of multiple dwelling unit which you don't find with the other customers that you deal with in terms of the common connectivity issues there?
I'd say that I think MTUs have a disadvantage in that, usually in a lot of cases, it's hard for the customers to self-help, which is a whole other thing that RouteThis offers. But the advantage is that everyone is managed. So you can make those changes and you have that power without having to worry about, customers maybe that have brought their own devices or have done weird network setups and things like that. So you're really worrying about, you're in control up to the access points, including the access points where other service providers we work with in the UK and globally, maybe they have like a ton of legacy devices they don't have management of. Maybe they have customers that bring their own, they go and buy Eros or Google Pods, or even just their own, single ASUS gaming thing with 10 million antenna, things like that, right? And then you lose that power. So I think that is an advantage to the troubleshooting for MTUs. But in terms of the specific problems, I think when I think about the customer experience and the problems that customers call in with, it's usually phrased as, I don't have internet overall, but that might mean in a room, that might mean in a specific device. They might say, some more technical people might say, I ran a speed test and it's not what I'm paying you for. And then it's just education on Wi-Fi speed versus wired speed, because who plugs in through Ethernet these days? And you typically can't in an MTU situation anyway. Or they might just say, my videos buffer or my Zoom buffers when I'm working from home. And then, it's really vague in terms of you then use a, software like ours to narrow it down. Okay, that could be a coverage issue. That could be that we're not delivering enough, enough speed to the access point or to the router. It could be old devices like Elliot mentioned. It could be congestion of other networks. It could be congestion of a baby monitor or microwave. It could be the position of the router if you're not an MTU again. So I think when you broaden it up past the MTU market, we give tools for all those other use cases as well that maybe Elliot and Ask4 don't necessarily have to worry about in terms of, I've seen routers in some crazy places when people are using like our video and photo tool, for example. I've seen a router in the freezer because it was hot. I've seen a router behind an aquarium and water's really bad for signal, stuff like that. That you might not think about, that you're like, no one would ever do that. But, I see videos online on how you can hide your router in a drawer because it's ugly. And you don't figure that out till you're looking at it or you're working your troubleshooting. So I think, RouteThis helps narrow down the very broad customer problem into the specific cause. And that applies obviously to MTUs as well as the broader market. So you just have a little bit more control over that initial setup and control over how you can resolve it in that managed situation.
But sort of drawing down into more of maybe the business aspect of using customer experience software in an MTU unit, I was just wanting to touch upon sort of what metrics do you find, Elliot, improved customer experience brings you as an MSP?
So we're very keen on ensuring that our customers have the best time possible when using Ask4 services, whether that's the overall network or if they do have to get in touch with us. Ideally, we'd never have customers contact us at all, but in the odd times that we do have to help people, we want to ensure that we're doing the best that we can. So using something like RouteThis, it gives them control of what they give us, if that makes sense. So they know what they're sending us. It tells them what's happening. And then once we get the information, we tell them what's going on. We give them a bit of feedback from what we've received, and then we tell them what their next steps are. So we're seeing an increase in customer satisfaction for app usage. Our previous way of diagnosing issues wasn't pretty great. It was more archaic, and we used to get people who do loads of different tests on laptops and things like that, which for your average user isn't great. Like, you don't want to spend time messing around doing tests when you can just download an app and send it away. So we're seeing an improvement on our customer satisfaction, which means we're also getting a faster response rate from customers. So they don't have to find 10-15 minutes to go run these tests, and we can do the testing on the phone immediately. We just get them to head over to that page, download RouteThis, and away we go.
And maybe sort of drawing down into the partnership a little bit further, and Matt, you could probably attest to that in terms of how you work with other customers, and so maybe bring that to you, this question to you first. But obviously, having a partnership with an ISP is key and crucial. And so I was just going to draw down into the partnership. Obviously, there's a variety of different competitors out there. Why do you think yourselves and Ask4 work well together, and how do you help them in terms of developing that customer experience for their customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Elliot, I think you came in after kind of we'd already gone live. So I'll talk a little bit about that implementation, which I think is a differentiator. But also, I think a big one, honestly, is just the fact that to implement RouteThis, you don't need to buy any, you don't need to deploy hardware. You don't have to deploy firmware updates to all of your, your legacy routers and stuff like that to get compatibility, right? We are a pure software solution, and we work on our end to make our software compatible with your equipment and your customers and everything without you having to do deployment. So it's much quicker and much less expensive compared to a hardware deployment. To get a critical mass of hardware into the field that has maybe software that you want can take, 5 years I've seen, or more, right? You don't want to just be replacing routers at your own cost to get software out there, right? If they're working, because that's just, that's an expense. So it's time consuming. So we find a lot of support teams are using very fragmented systems, if they have systems at all, for troubleshooting, maybe from a bunch of different vendors. So I think some of the major differentiators are, that quick deployment, that lower cost to get it out in the field, and that, we can go live in the span of months, not years, is big. But also just the coverage of even bring your own device. Again, not a problem for MTUs, but if your customers are bringing their own devices, or if you have those legacy ones, we can get you to, your support team can have the same tools and the same experience providing every single customer, regardless of the equipment that they have in their home, which is great. For non-managed customers, we even have features that we can set up to let your agents remote into almost any router to change settings and stuff if you want to provide that experience as well without having to have a managed platform that you've deployed. Which is great. And then I think on the agent end, the experience is the big thing that we focus on. That is a big differentiator. We're not, while, we have talked about maybe you need to get some ping and traceroute results to go ship to OpenReach to get your truck booked. That's not usually where our the agents that are using RouteThis are living on the troubleshooting call. Maybe they're sending that out to the NOC team or whatever, but we wrap all of this technical data up in a very nice, easy to use UX that gives them enough guidance that they can troubleshoot even if they're a little less technical of a support team without having to escalate to a tier 2 or a NOC team and things like that. And I think that's a big one. We're not just diagnostics on a screen that you have to train everyone on how to read. You don't have to read graphs and trace routes and be super technical to provide great customer experience if you're an agent in RouteThis.
You have any sort of statistics you could show us in terms of how that customer experience improvement affects the results and the performance of you as a managed service provider?
I've not got anything to hand, unfortunately. I know that largely we're seeing a lot quicker responses, and we're getting that sort of better feedback from our customers because they're not having to do as much testing. That's not something that anybody really wants to do, really. Like if you get home at the end of a long day, you don't want to sit there running tests, doing ping tests and things like that. Whereas if it's just a quick run of the app, you could be like, yeah, this takes me 2 minutes and I can still do the rest of my things that I want to. I don't have to be sat in front of my computer. So unfortunately, I don't have any metrics to hand that I can show, but we've been using RouteThis for the past, I want to say 3, maybe 4 years now, certainly pre-COVID, and it's definitely sped things up for us. And that's one of the key elements that we were after from a partner that did these testing for us.
That was good. And Matt, I don't know whether you, maybe from the wider customer base, whether you have any sort of stats to show around that side of things.
Yeah, actually, that's a big part of what we do. I guess another differentiator, I didn't hit on this. I kind of mentioned the implementation process. We have, a large services team that works one-to-one with each of our new partners to get them set up and seeing the success they were looking for. And then we have a separate team, customer success and account management, that kind of works with you after that implementation to make sure that you're seeing the business benefits. So we work with a lot of our customers just doing, what the management teams want to see, which is an ROI study and see the results and the benefits of RouteThis. So I have some of those numbers actually. I think kind of piggybacking on where Elliot was talking, AHT, handle time, is a big one. I think that especially in your market for every type of customer, if you're working with OpenReach and how long it can take to get that information, if you're walking that they need, to file a ticket or anything like that. we see a big swing. I think on average, we see around about a 20% overall in the market between, all of our customers. So this be ones that don't really care to lower handle time, which exists, as well as ones that are really focused on it. But for those ones that see those really long Wi-Fi calls, because it's a tough, detailed troubleshooting, we can see up to a 50% of handle time reduction. FCR as well. Solving that ticket on the first touch is a big thing, and we see around 25% on average across all of our partners. But then we get into the bigger ticket items too. So we see around a 9% reduction in how often you're replacing routers incorrectly. So this is just straight cost. You deploy a new device into the field, you collect their old one, you've paid all this money, and they have the same problem. That's not great. That's expensive. So that's an overall router. But obviously that clusters into the unnecessary ones, because sometimes it is necessary. We see an improvement in churn of about 7%, which is probably the biggest cost when you look at customer lifetime value. And then specific to non-specific to the UK, but we usually see a reduction in the number of technicians you send out of about 21%. And again, in the UK market, that's usually clustered into the ones that you're charged back on. So if you look at just that number, it would be far greater than that 21%. It's usually 21% overall, but in your market, typically you're not paying for everyone, right? If it's correctly sent out and OpenReach doesn't charge you back, that's fine for most of our partners, because they fixed a real problem that you couldn't have fixed on your end, right? So we usually see a very large reduction in the chargebacks. But again, this is without any of that hardware deployment, with the involvement of our professional services team getting people up and running really quickly, which is a benefit. You want to see this. I think everyone's saying, how can I see benefit this year, not in 5 years in this economic climate? How can I see savings now? And I think being able to see all those numbers in year one of a deployment is huge.
Yeah, I think that hits the money on the head in terms of the market at the moment. I think there's a lot more investment scrutiny in the UK market, so instantaneous impact is something that's key. I maybe just wanted to sort of conclude the conversation today and maybe go a bit more high level and ask Elliot this so MDUs, MTUs are kind of a big question mark across the UK ISP sector at the moment. What parallels and challenges do you see between being a service provider towards an MTU and the wider traditional broadband service providers?
I'd say we largely see similar issues across both traditional service providers and ones that do MTUs. Obviously, you still get lack of coverage, you get slow speed, you get disconnections. The main benefit is that you don't have to, or at least when you're part of a managed service solution, you don't have to worry about having to bodge all this equipment together to get it to work. We do all the hard work and all the heavy thinking and all the heavy lifting for it. So if we get a black spot or something like that, we will go send an engineer, put in another access point, which will improve things. But it's very much a case of the main difference is where you want the hard work to be, and it's whether or not you want to do it or you want someone else to do it, which is the convenient thing about Ask4 services, and that we do all that, and we have our own team to work out and design a wireless network from scratch. It's not going to be a case of, I think I'll put my router here and hope it works well. And it's a case of, we've got access points in very specific locations to give the greatest coverage to every user. So that's probably the main difference, I'd say, between it. Any ISP will share similar issues across their customer base, because there's a limited number of things that can go wrong. But it's a case of where your customer wants to see their involvement, and I'm sure most key people, myself included, I want to do as little as possible and have a great service. I don't want to do all the heavy lifting, whereas we're quite happy to do it here at Ask4, so our customers don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, and then Matt, from a customer experience perspective, what parallels would you see in terms of the challenges? I mean, I think we can draw down to some of them off the back of the conversations we've had today.
Yeah, I think Elliot's hitting the nail on the head. It's It really is. I think the market has shifted over the last decade, but really concentrated the last little while. I think you said there's 50% FTTH penetration in the UK, and we're seeing that same sort of thing in all of our markets because we work very globally. And I think the differentiator for all these years has been speed. We're faster. We can offer you faster than our competition. But in a world where everyone has a gigabit, how are you differentiating, right? And it's and customers, I think, through the working from home and things like that over the past few years, have started to kind of conceptualize not what they would call experience, but at its core, it's customer experience. It's, does my internet work all the time how I want it to? Maybe, they're getting to the point where they're like, I've paid for enough speed and I've understood through all my interactions with these companies, like I have enough speed now. So why can't my Zoom keep up with my meetings and things like that? So I think the differentiation is moving in a lot of places to that service and that experience, and people are advertising that more. It could be through, we have the best, we never have a queue. It could be we guarantee our coverage wall to wall is a big one that we're seeing as well. So I think some of those specifics to us would be like, do you provide for non-MTUs, do you provide self-service where I can fix these problems myself without having to wait in a queue or having to talk to a human? Do your techs do a great enough install that you can guarantee coverage and experience? Elliot nailed one of the advantages that I mentioned too, which is, you guys decide where everything goes and it stays there. In a normal deployment, even if you're doing self-install or if a technician's going out to do like an installation, when they leave that home, how do you as a company know that the coverage is going to be there that they're wanting? Or are you going to get a call back in the next week and maybe early life churn because you haven't fulfilled your promise and they're able to get out of that contract? We offer a tool for technicians to use on that install to make sure that they have the coverage throughout the whole unit or the whole home or whatever they're living in. And then, getting into the parallels to MTU is that support experience just quick and efficient and I don't have to do a lot of thinking and troubleshooting on my end? Are you farming the work out to me as a customer? I don't like that. That's in my head. Like I waited for 30 minutes to talk to you maybe, and then you're asking me to do all this stuff. And that's not a great experience. So I think that differentiation across the market, regardless of what type of service provider you are, I think people are starting to talk about that and their support experiences and their quality of service more than they're saying, well, my internet's really fast. Everyone's is now. If you're in a major city, I'll say you guys have a lot of remote.
To that notion, I think that brings us to the end of today's interview. I'd like to thank Elliot and Matt for participating, and I look forward to meeting you all on the next edition of the ISPA Insights Interviews.